I'm 66 years old now, and for the first time I'm going to tell the truth. Not the version the papers printed after the Mount St. Helens eruption, not the drunken rumors that drifted through bars up north, but the truth that's been eating through 40 winters of my life. I can still feel the cold of that first morning, the sting of sap in the air, and the sound of a forest breathing after a storm. It was 1957 and I was 28, young enough to believe the woods would last forever. The pines were bent under ice, their needles whispering against one another as I walked the ridgeline with my axe slung across my shoulder. I was out there to mark fallen timber for the company, but I ended up marking something else entirely, something no man should have seen and kept living the same way. The first thing that caught me wasn't a footprint, not exactly, it was a shape pressed deep into snow, a depression larger than any bear track I'd measured. It had 5 toes, each one the size of my thumb. The prints led downhill, where fog hugged the valley like smoke from a dying fire. I followed without thinking. There was a rhythm to it, footprints, breath, heartbeat. The air was heavy, damp with cedar rot. When the fog thinned for a moment, I saw movement between the trunks. It wasn't the swagger of a bear or the glide of a deer. It moved like a man, shoulders turning, head low, aware of being watched. My breath hitched. The forest went still. Then it was gone, swallowed by mist. I remember the silence afterward, the kind that feels alive. That was the moment everything shifted inside me. I just didn't know it yet. I spent the next week returning to that ridge, each time telling myself I was checking for storm damage. But really I was chasing something I couldn't name. I found snapped branches at 8 feet high, bark peeled from trunks as if clawed by giant hands. Once I found hair tangled in briars, coarse, black, longer than any animal's I'd seen. I kept it in a matchbox for years. The men at the mill laughed when I told them. "Drink less, Harold," they said. "The woods whisper back when you whisper too much." Maybe they were right. But I couldn't stop listening. By February, snow had turned to sleet. The nights came earlier, darker. I started leaving food near the creek, jerky, dried apples, sometimes a bit of bread wrapped in cloth. It made me feel foolish, like I was trying to befriend a ghost. But the next mornings they were always gone. No footprints leading in or out, just empty snow. Once I found the cloth folded neatly beside a stone. That small act, that carefulness, unnerved me more than any growl could have. It meant thought. It meant someone or something was watching me as closely as I was watching it. Weeks passed and the forest grew quieter. The loggers packed up after the thaw and I stayed behind to scout one last trail. That's when I heard it, the sound that still wakes me in the middle of the night. It came from deep in the valley, a cry that started like a groan but rose into something mournful, almost human. It carried through the trees, low and shaking, like grief itself had found a voice. I ran toward it. The air burned in my lungs. When I reached the clearing, I found a snare half buried in snow. A man's trap, steel jaws rusted with blood. The prints around it were huge. And then I saw him. He was crouched just beyond the tree-line, dark against the pale snow, one arm slick with blood where the trap had snapped. His chest rose and fell in heavy, pained breaths. He watched me, eyes glinting amber in the dim light. I froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but something else, some quiet pull I can't explain, held me there. I took one step forward. He flinched but didn't move away. Slowly I reached for the trap, pried it open with my axe handle and kicked it aside. The creature made a low rumble, half warning, half thank you. Then with one long stride he vanished into the fog. I stood there for a long time, shaking, not from fear but from something close to awe. I didn't tell anyone. Who would have believed me? I didn't even believe myself. But I knew I couldn't forget it. Spring came and with it silence. I went back to logging, pretending life had resumed its rhythm, but my mind stayed in those woods. Every gust of wind felt like breath on my neck. Every crack of branch made me look over my shoulder. I started keeping notes in a small journal, dates, sounds, strange tracks, even the way certain birds stopped singing before dusk. I began to see the forest differently. It wasn't just land anymore, it was alive, aware, watching. By summer, the loneliness grew unbearable. I tried to talk about it once, over whiskey, to a hunter from Yakima. He laughed until he realized I wasn't joking. Then he told me a story of his own, a shadow near Mount Rainier, a scream that froze his blood. "You saw him too," he whispered, and his hand trembled around the glass. For a moment I felt less alone. But when I returned a week later, his cabin was empty, door hanging open, tracks leading into the pines. They ended in mud and silence. I never saw him again. Years later, I'd learned there were men who came after such stories, men with badges but no names, asking questions about wild men, mutations, forest incidents. They came to my camp once in '59, asked if I'd seen anything unusual. I told them no. One of them smiled too easily. I burned my journal that night just in case. But I couldn't burn the memory. The more I tried to forget, the clearer it became. The smell of pine tar. The shape of that wounded arm. The sound it made when the trap gave way. It haunted me because it felt like something pure, something ancient, had trusted me for a moment. That winter, the heaviest snow I'd ever seen buried the valley. I went out one morning and found something waiting at the edge of my cabin porch. A piece of cedar, whittled roughly but shaped unmistakably like a hand, 5 fingers, palm open, carved with clumsy care. I stood there a long time, wind howling, flakes settling on my coat. I didn't know if it was a warning or a gift, but I kept it. Still have it, in fact, though I can't say why. Maybe to remind myself that some things, once touched, can never be unseen. That night, as I sat by the fire turning that carving over in my hands, I thought of the way he'd looked at me, wariness giving way to recognition. I'd seen that same look in men after the war, the kind who'd lost everything but still couldn't bring themselves to hate. The flames threw long shadows across the cabin walls, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what I'd stepped into. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was responsibility. A secret that didn't belong to me, yet somehow was mine to keep. Snow fell heavy again before dawn. I went outside, breath fogging the air, and saw new prints leading away from the cabin, broad, deep, deliberate. They went north toward the ridge where I'd first seen him. I followed them as far as I dared. The wind howled through the trees, and I could almost swear I heard that low, mournful cry again, carried faintly between the pines. I stopped, heart hammering. The prints ended suddenly as if the forest had swallowed them whole. I stood there, surrounded by silence, the cold biting through my gloves. For a long while I thought I was alone. Then I noticed the smallest thing, a second trail of prints beside the first, lighter, shorter, half-hidden. Under falling snow. I followed them with my eyes until they vanished into the mist. And for the first time, I wondered if I wasn't just tracking one creature at all. If I had known then what those 2 sets of prints meant, I might have turned back. But the forest keeps its secrets, and I was already part of one that the years rolled by like fog through the valley, soft, endless, and full of things I didn't talk about. After that winter of the cedar carving, I left the logging camps for good. The noise of men and chainsaws had started to feel wrong, like an offense to something sacred. I bought a patch of land near the foothills and built a small cabin by hand. It wasn't much, for walls, a tin roof, a stove that smoked when it rained, but it was close enough to where I'd last seen him. I told myself I was there for the trapping, for the solitude, but that was only half the truth. The other half waited somewhere beyond the pines, breathing, watching. In those early years, I caught glimpses now and then, broken branches higher than a man's reach, the echo of something large moving through the trees. Sometimes, just before dawn, I'd hear the faintest whistle, 3 low notes carried on the wind. I started answering, a quiet hum that came without thought. I never saw what answered back, but the forest began to feel aware of me. The loneliness that used to gnaw at me changed shape. I wasn't sure if I was being haunted or accompanied, but either way, I was never truly alone again. By 1974, my beard had gone gray at the edges, and my hands shook when the cold set in. That winter was the worst I'd seen, the kind that cracked trees and froze rivers solid. I remember the night it all changed. The storm came fast, white and wild, tearing through the valley with a voice that felt almost human. I was gathering wood when I heard a sound over the wind, a deep, broken cry, like a wounded elk but heavier, rougher. I knew that sound. I grabbed my lantern and trudged through the snow, heart thudding, light flickering across endless white. It took me an hour to find him. He was half buried under a fallen cedar, one leg twisted, blood dark against the snow. The sight of him near took my breath. The same amber eyes found me again, clouded with pain but not fear. I don't remember deciding to help. I just moved, cutting branches, heaving with every ounce of strength left in me. The tree rolled enough for him to drag himself free. When he stood, his full height towered over me, steam rising from his body like breath from a furnace. He didn't run. He watched me, panting, trembling, and for one long heartbeat, the storm quieted. Then he stumbled. I caught his weight without thinking, my arm pressed against fur slick with blood and heat. I could feel the strength in him even broken, a power barely held back. I whispered, "It's all right. I've got you." He made a low sound in his throat, half growl, half sigh, and didn't pull away. I led him to the old hollow cedar where the ground stayed dry. 4 days I tended to him there, packing snow around his leg, feeding the fire low, leaving bits of smoked meat near his reach. He didn't eat while I watched, but every morning the food was gone, and the firewood I'd stacked seemed mysteriously replenished. Once, I woke to find my own coat draped over me, though I hadn't slept with it. It wasn't kindness in the human sense, it was something deeper, a silent recognition. We were two wounded things surviving the same storm. When the snow melted, he vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared. No farewell, no sign except for the cedar hollow left neatly cleared, as if thanking me without words. I thought that would be the end of it, but as spring turned to summer, I began to notice a pattern. Fish left by the creek. Antlers stacked in a pile near my door. And sometimes, in the half-light of dusk, a shadow watching from the tree-line. I stopped thinking of him as a monster. He became something else, someone else. I called him Ashfoot, after the soot-colored prints he left behind in the thaw. For years our lives moved in quiet rhythm. I'd leave gifts, a blanket, a bit of salt, the first catch of the season, and he'd answer in kind. The forest became our language. I learned to read its moods the way men read faces. The cracking of a branch meant caution. The soft shifting of birds meant safety. And when the air grew still and heavy, I knew to stay inside, for something wild and sorrowful passed between the trees those nights, as if mourning its own existence. But secrets are never safe for long. In 1983 men came again, different this time. Not rangers, not hunters. Government types in unmarked trucks. They said they were studying environmental anomalies. I knew better. One morning I followed their tracks up the North Ridge and found what they were really after. Blood on the rocks. Feathers. And farther on, half covered in snow, a body, smaller than Ashfoot, maybe half his size. Eyes glazed open, chest torn where bullets had struck. The smell hit me before the sight did, iron, sap, smoke. I knelt there until my knees froze. I'd buried men before, but not like this. This one looked almost peaceful, as if death had been a relief. When I turned, he was there, standing at the edge of the trees. Ashfoot didn't move. He looked at me, then at the body. The sound that came from him wasn't anger. It was grief. Pure, breaking grief that cracked the air. I couldn't bear it. I whispered, "I'm sorry," but it felt meaningless against what we'd done to his kind. He turned away and was gone before I could follow. That night, the forest roared with a storm that had nothing to do with weather. I didn't sleep. I kept hearing that sound, the sound of something ancient realizing it's alone. After that, I started hiding my traps, warning travelers off with stories of ghosts and curses. Anything to keep people away. My cabin grew smaller, darker. My health began to fail, lungs shot from smoke, joints stiff from cold. I stopped writing, stopped speaking to anyone. But every dawn, I'd still whistle those 3 notes, and sometimes, faintly, I'd hear them answered back from far beyond the ridge. That was enough to keep me alive. The years after blurred together. Seasons bled into one another, just wind and rain and memory. I saw him only a few more times. Once at dusk, when he left a young elk at my doorstep, freshly killed, throat clean, no sign of struggle. Once in summer, when I found his shadow across the river, watching me fix my roof, like an old friend making sure I didn't fall. And once in autumn, when I heard him hum that same 3-note tune in the fog. Each encounter left me hollow and full all at once, the way you feel after hearing a song that used to mean something. But time doesn't care for secrets. My hair turned white. My hands grew unsteady. The logging roads pushed closer, new fences cutting through what used to be wild. I knew I couldn't protect him forever. One evening I found new footprints by the creek, 2 sets again. One large, one small. They circled near my cabin, curious, unafraid. I realized then that he wasn't alone anymore. The thought filled me with both joy and dread. I prayed no one else would ever find them. The last time I saw him was the night of the red moon, sometime in '89. Smoke from distant fires hung in the sky, tinting everything copper. I was sitting by my fire when I heard footsteps outside, not hurried, not hiding. When I opened the door, he stood at the edge of the clearing. Older, gray streaking through the dark fur, eyes softer somehow. For a moment, the years between us vanished. He raised his arm, palm open, the same gesture as the cedar carving from long ago. Then he turned toward the tree-line, and beside him moved a smaller shape, walking steady and sure. I didn't follow. I just watched until the forest swallowed them both. After that, the nights felt longer. I kept the whistle going each dawn, though no one answered. My strength faded, but the bond we'd built stayed alive in those quiet woods. Sometimes I think I can still smell that wild musk in the wind, or hear branches shift as something passes unseen. The world has changed, men, machines, all of it, but that memory remains untouched, sacred. He trusted me once and I never broke that trust. This morning I walked down to the creek again, though it near killed me to get there. The snow was melting, and along the bank, half hidden under ice, I found a single print. Broad, deep, unmistakable. I knelt beside it, heart pounding like it did all those years ago. The edges were fresh. For a long time I just stared, too afraid to breathe it away. Then I noticed something beside it, smaller, fainter, pressed close as if walking in step. The fog thickened around me, curling like smoke from the past. My eyes stung from cold, or maybe from something else. I whispered the tune once more, those 3 notes lost to the wind. And for the first time in decades, faint but certain, I heard them answered back that I'm an old man now, bones brittle as frost, breath short and thin like smoke through cracks in a cabin wall. The forest outside my window no longer belongs to me, or to him. The machines came first, then the hikers, then the noise. But the silence that matters, the kind that once hummed between 2 living things, that's long gone. Still, when the wind changes, I hear echoes of what we were. I promised myself I'd take this secret to my grave, but graves are only worth something if the truth doesn't rot with them. It's been 5 years since I last saw Ashfoot. The winters since have felt longer, emptier. I kept leaving food at the same creek, though I knew it was foolish. The snow covered everything, and with each passing year, I half convinced myself I'd imagined him. Until last spring, when I found that carving in the hollow log, 2 figures side by side, the bigger one bent slightly as if watching over the smaller. The wood was still fresh, the cuts clean. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. He remembered. After all these years, he remembered me. That night, I lit the stove and watched the flames blur through the tears in my eyes. For the first time, I wondered if I'd done right by him, by keeping him hidden. I told myself I protected him from men, but maybe I was protecting men from him. Secrets are heavy things. They bend your spine until you start to walk like you're guilty. And I am guilty of silence, of fear, of wanting something wild to stay pure when the world around it was being devoured. I think about that winter when he was hurt, the way his blood steamed in the snow, the way he let me touch him. That moment became my life's anchor. I built my days around it, my years around that promise. And now, near the end, I don't know what I've kept safe anymore. The forest is dying. The air smells of oil instead of pine. I cough blood into a rag some mornings and pretend not to notice the color. But I still listen for him when the fog rolls in. It's habit more than hope. Last week I saw something at the tree line, just movement, slow and deliberate. My heart nearly stopped. It was dusk and the fog was thick, but I swear I caught a glimpse of those amber eyes again. They lingered for a heartbeat, then vanished. That night I dreamed of the cedar hollow, of firelight on fur, of a sound like humming. I woke with a taste of sap on my tongue. I knew then what I had to do. By morning I packed a small bag, lantern, canteen, the old carving, and the whistle I carved decades ago from deer bone. The path to the hollow is nearly gone now, swallowed by undergrowth and memory. It took me most of the day to reach it, my breath ragged, knees trembling. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize the place. The great cedar still stood, but it leaned now, hollowed by time and lightning. The air inside smelled of moss and old smoke. I ran my hand over the inner bark, and there, beneath layers of decay, I felt the faint marks of carvings, clumsy, deliberate, human-sized hands etched long ago. Mine and his. I sat there until the light faded, listening to the forest breathe. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked. Then another. I raised the whistle and played those same 3 notes, weak and trembling. The sound carried through the fog like a memory. For a long moment, nothing answered. Then, so soft I thought I imagined it, came a reply. The same tune, low and slow, wrapped in wind and distance. My chest tightened. Tears burned hot against the cold. He was out there. Still alive. Still keeping his promise. I stayed through the night, though sleep came only in fragments. Every time the fire hissed, I thought I heard footsteps. At dawn I saw them, prints by the stream. One large, one smaller. The snow melted around them, the edges sharp and new. My throat closed. The smaller one must have been young. He'd kept a family hidden all this time, while I grew old and the world forgot him. The thought filled me with both pride and sorrow. I wanted to see him one last time, to know he forgave me for what men did. But deep down I understood he'd only come if he chose to. By noon I began the long walk back, leaning on my staff. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just that deep, waiting silence that used to mean he was near. Then I smelled it, smoke faint but wrong. Not wood smoke. Diesel. The hum of engines carried through the valley. I climbed to a rise and saw them, Two trucks parked near the old ridge, men in camouflage moving through the trees with rifles and cameras. My stomach turned to ice. Someone had found the tracks. I made my way down the slope, slipping, stumbling, heart pounding like it did in my youth. The snow around the cedar hollow was disturbed, boot prints, drag marks. They'd been here. My legs nearly gave out. I called his name, the one I'd never spoken aloud before, just a sound I'd kept buried under my tongue. The forest swallowed it whole. Then behind me a sound, low, guttural, trembling with rage. I turned and saw a shadow moving fast between the trees. He burst from the fog, taller than I remembered, scars crisscrossing his chest, eyes burning with fury. The men froze. One shouted. A shot rang out, echoing off the ridges. I screamed for them to stop, but the forest exploded in chaos. Gunfire, screams, breaking wood. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, praying it would end. When it finally did, the silence that followed was unbearable. I opened my eyes and saw the men gone, their trucks already grinding down the road. Blood stained the snow near the cedar. My heart shattered at the sight. I crawled to him, my old body barely obeying. He was on his side, breath shallow, eyes dim but still alive. The younger one, the smaller shape, stood a few feet away, trembling, watching. I pressed my hand to his arm, feeling the warmth fade beneath my fingers. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though the words were useless things. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw recognition, the same look from that long-ago night in the trap. Then he did something I'll carry to my grave. He reached out, touched my shoulder, and nodded once. Forgiveness. Then his hand fell heavy and still. The smaller one made a sound I can't describe, like grief and thunder mixed together, then vanished into the trees. I stayed there until the cold bit through my coat, until the light turned gold and the forest swallowed the day. I buried him where we first met, under the cedar's roots, where the earth was soft and smelled of rain. I marked the grave with the carving of our two figures. I didn't pray. I just whispered, "Rest easy, my friend. The world's not built for things as gentle as you." By the time I made it home, the stars had come out and my lungs burned with every breath. I knew I wouldn't last much longer. I sat by the fire, the whistle in my lap, and waited. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, low and steady, carrying a sound I almost recognized, a faint echo of those three notes, drifting farther and farther away. I smiled, though my heart was breaking. If anyone ever finds this recording, know that he was real. Not a monster, not a myth, just a living soul who trusted the wrong species. The forest will keep the rest. My time's nearly done, and I can feel the fire dimming inside me. But before it goes out completely, I'll say this: he wasn't the secret. The secret was the friendship that grew between us, something so pure the world couldn't stand to see it live. The fire crackles low now. My breath slows. I look through the window one last time, and for a heartbeat, I swear I see him standing among the trees, taller, unbroken, watching. I close my eyes and let the sound of the pines take me. The forest remembers. And now, so will you.